Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. Today we're going to be having a look at cable tidying and just general new computer arrangements. Now, you may have recently built a brand new computer using what looked like a lot of top-end parts like these. And you may have put it all together for the first time, your first ever machine, and suddenly thought, I kind of thought it would be prettier than this. I thought it would be tidier, like a show computer, with all my shiny black PCBs in. And that's exactly what the owner of this computer thought. They put it together and it starts up and it runs, and they did it, but they were just a little bit disappointed with the results. So they brought it into me to let me have a hack at it. And so I thought I'd just set up the camera and show you my method of tidying stuff up. Now, considering my profession, I actually build relatively few computers. However, I do have an eye for detail and I am anal about cable tidying. So what we're going to do, we're going to try and tidy all this stuff up and make it look like a show computer. So I'm going to start off just by unplugging everything here, just so we can get a clean slate. So let's just rip all of this out and see what we're left with. Right, so the starting point for me is always the CPU power lead, mainly because this is quite an easy one. It goes from power supply at the bottom all the way to the top. The obvious thing to do with this is to take it behind the motherboard. Now this case has got a big cavity behind the motherboard tray that we can bury a lot of cables in, so this should be fairly straightforward. So what we're going to do, we're going to spin this round, take the other panel off, and see if we can get this all the way down the back. Okay, so we're just going to now poke that CPU power lead through the top. This one can sometimes be a bit of a bastard to get through. You've just got to clear the top rails there. Right, I'm going to pull that all the way through. Because we've got flat cables here on this modular power supply, try and make sure that you angle it so the cable goes where it wants to. So for example, if I now take it 90 degrees, instead of doing that, I'm better off doing that and applying a fold to the cable. That will make sure that the cable wants to go in that direction. The secret to making cables stay where you put them is to twist them in such a manner that they want to go in that direction. So we can now go straight through the bottom void. Right, and we can now plug that straight into the power supply, wherever it's supposed to go. There we go. Right, that needs to go into one of these bottom ones. I'm going to put it into the closest one. And what I'm going to do here is plug it in, and then I'm going to push any wire that is not required back through the void, just so we've got the least amount possible visible in the case. Now of course that's going to make a big loop at the back of the computer, but we'll sort all of those out later. Don't worry about those for now. Behind the motherboard, where you can't see anything, the great thing about that is once you're done there, you can just fold all those cables out the way. So we'll worry about that later. Right, that's a front USB, that can just stay as it is, there's nothing wrong with that. These little fellas for power lights and LEDs and things like that. Now this is a fairly tasty case we've got here, and these have actually got sheaths on them, which is quite uncommon. Normally they just come as bare wires. The way to make these look pretty is to just do something with them. If I only have a couple, for example on my case, mine's quite a simple case. I've literally just got power, reset and hard drive, and because there's only three, I've actually braided mine together. If you have multiple ones like here, the best thing to do is just to twist them up. Twisting doesn't always look the prettiest, but the great thing about twisting is it just keeps the wires together, and again it just reduces the visual clutter. So we'll twist them up and then connect them all up. When you're plugging in all these little wires, look for an arrow on the back of the connector, which the camera won't be able to see from here, but there will be an arrow on the back of the connector. That denotes the positive connector. The positive 99 times out of 100 goes on the left when you're facing the motherboard. Another giveaway is if you have coloured wires, the coloured wire will be the positive and the black wire will be the negative. If it's a switch, like the power switch or the reset switch, it doesn't matter which way around it goes. Right, what is this? That is a front fan. These noodly cables are super annoying. There's very little you can do with them unless they're long enough. I'm just going to pull that out and just see how much I can get rid of this. I think we can take this all the way along the bottom of the case. Or failing that, just coming through the back void here, again, we'll take it out of sight. Now what I'm going to do is every time I bring another cable through, I'm going to try and bring it under the previous cable. And that just constantly forces everything backwards. And I'm going to try and bring it through to the nearest rubber point as well. What we want to try and avoid is this kind of thing. Instead, we want to try and bring things upwards like that, pull them all back like so, and try and keep these rubber flaps as closed as possible and go between them. And again, as you can see, that immediately looks tidier. It makes it look like there's less wires there. That's what we're trying to aim for here. So again, we'll take this through, feed it back behind everything else, and bring it through there. This is our audio cable. Now, audio cables usually go to the bottom left of the motherboard, so we'll pull this through and we'll try and bring that right along the bottom of the motherboard. Again, pushing it behind everything else. Goes that way around. And we've actually got a hole in the back of the case there I could go for. In fact, I'm going to do that. The longer you can stay behind the motherboard, the better. There we go, immediately out of sight. By the time the graphics card is in there, you won't even be able to see that. And again, I'm just going to twist that cable over so it's all pointing downwards. So all the cables twist away from the motherboard. Just move that out of the way. USB 3 ports. This one will bring this up a notch. And I'm just going to bend that cable to put a bend in it. I'm not being too forceful, I'm just putting a bit of tension on there. And again, when we plug that in, that will just want to stay in place. Right, this top fan here, I'm just going to adjust the positioning on this, because if I just lean this down, as you can see, it's not quite centered on the case, so we're just going to move that so it's a bit tidier. When you're placing fans, look for official mount points. So as you can see, these slightly elongated holes here, those are the mount points for 120mm fans. So we're going to shift these over to there so they line up with the official mount holes, and that'll make sure that those sit absolutely straight. Now, when you're putting fans into a case, there's a couple of considerations to make. If you can clearly see the back of the fan, this is just me being me, but personally I like to try and make sure that the label is the right way up, because little things like that just get noticed. However, a bigger priority is where the cable comes out at. Now, in this instance, we want the cables on the fans to be at the back of the case, so they're out of sight. The fan that was at this point, when it came into the shop, the cable was coming down the front. Now that immediately means it's hanging down from like here, which makes it really difficult to get out of the way. So again, we'll rotate these fans so the cables are right at the back. For case fans in general, by and large, the rule of thumb is the overall objective for any case is through flow. You want air coming in and air going out. You want to recycle, you want to get air through the case as fast as possible. That is what lowers your temperatures. So If in doubt, I personally say go for more exhaust than intake, because then you have negative air pressure in the case and that just pulls more air through your exhaust intake fans. The rule of thumb is front and bottom are intake, top and back are exhaust. If in doubt, that will usually go well. And also, when you're fitting fans, use the biggest damn screwdriver you can find, because these self-tappers are vicious. Okay, so I'll fit the other fan while I'm here as well. So once again, we're going to position that so the cable is coming down the back. Now, this wire is going to be heading towards system fan 1. Now, if I put the fan that way around, the cable is right at the back. However, if I rotate it through 90 degrees, it gives me a straight line down the side there. So again, we're going to align it for that 90-degree run. Now what I'm going to do, since I've discovered that I can actually lower this rear fan, I can just drop that right down, fit these top fans and then reposition. Right, let's just align that cable so it comes out the back. That's better. We're tucked right up against the motherboard there now. Right, and we can now lift this back fan up to meet the top fans. Right, what's next? This one. That's heading straight to the CPU option fan. And again, we'll just tuck that straight up the top there. So that just goes straight up, out the way, invisible. Right, now the CPU fan itself, I'm going to tuck this down the back so it dives straight under the CPU cooler. There we go. That's all our top and back fans and CPU fan plugged in. And as you can see, you can hardly see anything in there so far. Right, this back fan, where's that going? That's going down here. Now when you've got a fan cable that's going to go all the way down the bottom, I wonder if that's long enough. We might be able to take that up and over the back actually. Let's see if we'll get away with that. Oh no, 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 no. That is not going to happen. We're going to go under this card here, so let's take that out. The question is how we get it to stay against the motherboard. And poke this through this lower hole to bury the excess. I'll tell you what I have seen, there's a nice little zip tie opportunity. I hate using zip ties, I don't resort to these unless absolutely necessary. However, this is one of those little times when you can just tuck a cable really neatly out the way with a well-placed zip tie. There we go. And we'll just tuck that up against the back and go under the audio cable at the bottom there. And bang, that is gone. Right, now we need to start going with some of the heavier cables. Let's get the main ATX cable out of the way. It's the biggest bastard in the case, this one. This one's not too bad because on this modular power supply they split it into a couple of clumps. This makes it much easier to deal with. On a lot of power supplies this will be just a single loom, which makes it very stiff, very heavy cable, very difficult to get out of the way. I'm hoping this is going to be long enough, and I think it is, just so we can go straight through these voids. So I'm pushing it through. I'm making sure that the release catch is going to line up when I fold it over, like so. Right, this is very difficult to plug in, this one as well. I'm going to secure that properly when I lay the computer down soon. Okay, right. I think it might be about time we get the graphics card in. Problem with the graphics card is it's a big, huge slab in the middle of everything that blocks all of your access to the case. So you want to leave it to the last possible moment where you can. Yeah, we'll do the power to the drives first. Right. Now, the SSD and the hard drive, there are two ways of doing these. If you want quick access, then you have the connectors facing you like this. But if you want to go super stealth, you turn your drives around so the cables are at the back. Now obviously this makes access a lot harder, but to be honest, if you've built your computer right, you don't need to take it apart. And certainly this guy, he's got a 2TB Western Dig Red, and he's got 128 gig Corsair SSD there. He's not going to need to change these drives for the foreseeable future. If he's using more storage than this, then he's doing something wrong. So, or he's storing an awful lot of raw, uncut Blu-ray rips. So, at any rate, I'm going to reverse his drives, and then that's all going to be super stealth and neat when we plug them in. As a side note, I'm loving this case, to be honest. I'm a big fan of these fractal cases. I currently use a retro Cooler Master case, but when the day eventually comes that I buy a new case for my computer, it's either going to be a Corsair or a fractal. This case does have those natty SSD mount points around the back, but I'm not a big fan of them, to be honest, because the cable access to them is so tight that you just end up bent. I mean, I bend cables a little bit for the sake of aesthetic and things like that, but the SSD carriers you get on the back, you've got to ruin your cables so much to fit into those. I don't like them at all, so I try and avoid those if you possibly can. Right, I've deliberately left a 1 unit gap between them. When we put the cable in, you'll see what I mean in a moment. Right, so plug him into there. Right, and now what we shall find is that these are roughly 1 unit apart. We could go a little bit further, but notice if I'd gone directly above, I'd have to have a big bend in these cables, which just puts everything under unnecessary tension. Right, with a bit of luck, that should just go straight through there, and then that will plug into the DVD drive. If you want a really stealth look, just get rid of the DVD drive. You really don't need them these days. If you're building a really nice, neat computer, all you want to do is just make get an ISO of your Windows CD and put it on a flash drive and install straight off of USB 2. If you do that, there really just isn't any need for a DVD drive anymore, and it's just one less box in the case. Ultimately, the pathway to tidiness and neatness is to simplify. If it doesn't need to be in the computer, take it out. Right, now as you can see, we've got these loops around the back, but when we close it all up, the idea is these will all just bend against the back of the case like so. And that's the biggest crime of my cable tiding technique, is when I just flatten everything against the back, but you can't see any of it. And most cases like this one, there is enough space around the back here for that just to press against the back of the motherboard without any problems at all. Right, now I'm just going to identify what these things are. We've got a power input and 2 fan outputs here. So there's a fan controller somewhere on this. I just can't figure out where it is. Oh, here it is. There's a hidden switch at the front of this case. It's behind the main thing. Yeah, we'll leave that disconnected. It's personal preference. I don't like using case, I don't like using case fan switches because they're manual. You have to manually change them. I always try to use auto fan controllers because then you have that really nice safety net that if it's a hot day and your computer is unattended, it can kick the fans onto high speed itself. Now, as you can see, we plugged all of our fans into the motherboard. Motherboard fan controllers, especially when they're 4-pin ones, are really good these days. So I just put all of my faith in those. Go into the BIOS, set your fan controllers up, and you'll have a quiet computer. My general advice is to set all your case fans to minimum. If you've got a couple of 120 mils on your case, that's all you need, that's enough. Just enough to keep that air moving through. If you want a really quiet computer, you either need a really good fan controller that's going to keep all your fans spinning super slow, or better still, take out as many fans as you can. Because unfortunately, the thing is that fan decibel ratings, decibel is noise intensity, not noise volume. 2 fans at 20 decibels will still make more noise than 1 fan at 20 decibels. So the more fans you have, the noisier it's going to be. Right, serial ATA. 1. 2. And the other wire we've got is a red one. Because I'm a bro, I'm going to see if I can find a black one so he's got nice matching cables. Close. It's got white plugs, but it's still a black wire. That's slightly better. Okay. Right, these SATA leads, these can come through this void at the back. I'm going to use the middle connectors just simply because they line up perfectly with the top there. As you can see, we're just straight through. Okay, last item of business, the graphics card. Now, you should be plugging in to your first PCI Express 16 slot there. Now, however, I do things a little bit differently. You may have noticed when this case came in that it was mounted low down. Now that's something I subscribe to. I'm going to put it into this port as well. Now this port is an 8x port. You can see that the pins stop halfway along the slot. Now that's going to theoretically limit the bandwidth on the card. However, in my experience, this doesn't have any measurable impact on performance. However, this is a big GTX 970. I haven't actually run a card this big before. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually probably going to test it on both formats. The customer is paying me to tune this computer as well. So what I'll do, I'm going to plug it in this point firstly. This gives us a lower mount point which looks nicer and it gives more clearance to the CPU fan. So we're going to plug it in there. We're going to make sure that that's all bolted in properly, get the power to it. Then during testing, I'll benchmark it there and then I'll move it to the top slot and benchmark it again and see if there's any actual difference. So I'll get back to you on that one. Now, even though we're only going from there to there, I'm still taking it straight out the back of the case because we've got all of that excess wire to bury. And now sometimes it looks better if you go under, sometimes it looks better if you go over. So I think we're going to go over the top because I think I can just bend that back on itself and come in there. Now let's try putting a spiral, let's see if that works. No, don't like that. What are we going to do with that? There's a nice little gap behind this heat pipe. I'm just wondering if I can tuck it into there. I just need to make sure I support the graphics card while I maul the cables about like this, because it's very easy to do major damage if you're not careful. Yeah, I think that's going to go in there actually. There we go. Now we just straighten those out. And there we have it. It's not ideal, but there's very little you can do. One of the things I don't like about big modern graphics cards is just the amount of power that goes to them. However, that's fairly tightly out of the way now. Okay. Right, let's close up the back of the computer. Right, now we'll just see what we can tuck up the back here. Ow. If you can get any cables to stay in of their own accord, that's a good start. There we go, and those will fold out of the way. This case is particularly easy to get away with this because we go front and then we swing the side panel in. If you have a sliding affair, it's a little bit harder to get away with this, but it can be done. Just check those lines, nothing bulging, looking good. Right, around we go. Look at that. Right, let's lay this down. Alright, as you can now see, I'm just going to adjust these cables and just make sure they're sitting nicely. Make sure there's nothing under undue tension. That's all happy, that's all happy. Fold anything that we can. And there we go. Not bad.